Hi everyone, thanks for coming to the Postgraduate Open Day at the University of Cambridge and for coming along to this talk on the MPhil programme in Sociology. My name's Joe Cotton, I'm the Communications and Outreach Coordinator at the Department of Sociology, and I was also a student on the MPhil programme in 2017-2018. So I'm going to try and give you an overview of the whole MPhil programme in this talk, a little bit of words about my own experience on the programme as a student, and finally in the end some application tips, so you can make the best possible application if you do decide that you want to apply to this programme. So the MPhil programme, these are short, intensive 9-month programmes, so they really try to pack a lot in. The MPhil programme at Cambridge is part taught, part research. So at the start of the programme, you're attending lectures and seminars, you're building up your sociological knowledge, and then by the end of the programme, you're writing your own independent research dissertation, MPhil dissertation. So it's kind of got a little bit of both. So if you're someone that really feels like they want a lot of structure, they want to be taught a lot of things, you might want to be actually looking at a taught programme like an MA programme. Whereas if you want something purely research-based, you might be already thinking about applying to a PhD and skipping the master's step. For me, it was a perfect balance, or a useful balance, of those two elements. I didn't take an undergraduate degree in sociology, so I really appreciated the taught elements to help to develop my own knowledge further. And then when it came to the research, I really appreciated having the independence to go and pursue my own interests at a postgraduate level, conducting my own data collection, my own interviews, coming up with my own theories, doing my own analysis. So if that sounds exciting, let me tell you a little bit more about what the programme itself looks like. So those 9 months are split into 3 separate terms, which in Cambridge are called Michaelmas, Lent and Easter term. So in your first term, that's Michaelmas term, you have the majority of the taught element of the programme. So those are your core lectures within the MPhil pathway that you choose. And each pathway, I'll say a little bit more about this later, focuses on a particular kind of area of sociology, broadly speaking. So you can attend those lectures, build your knowledge base, and then you already start practicing academic writing with your research essays. Typically you'll write your first research essay 1 month into the programme. It's not a graded element, although you do receive feedback, so it's a kind of chance for you to find your feet, start getting to grips with some of the ideas, the concepts that are running around, write a kind of a longer essay about it, and get feedback from your academic supervisor. The programme will start in October, your first term will run till December, the next term starts in January of the following year. You're turning now more onto the kind of the methods and data collection, so you'll be taking some seminars in different research methods. Perhaps you're doing interviews or another form of data collection, so you can develop your kind of research method skills and begin some of the data collection for your dissertation project, and you will also complete the first graded component of the MPhil programme, which is the field review essay. I'll tell you more about that later, but essentially that's a timed essay, so you'll receive a week to complete this essay. You get the question at the start of the week, you spend the week kind of compiling your draft, and then you hand it in at the end of that week, and that's worth 40% of your final grade. Then in your third term you clear the decks and really focus on getting that dissertation written, so it's going to be a 15 to 20,000 word research project. When you apply to the programme, you apply with a proposal. Most students will change, once they are exposed to everything that Cambridge has on offer, they refine their ideas, they change their ideas. So don't feel totally tied to your research proposal, although do, of course, make the best possible job that you can of the proposal that you submit with your application, that you present to your prospective supervisor. But yeah, in that Easter term, it's really kind of focused on getting the dissertation written, doing the data analysis on the data that you've already collected, and putting the whole thing together. So what's the purpose of the programme? What's the benefit of the programme at Cambridge? For me, it's really the fact that you get both the taught and the research element. So you build both a kind of an in-depth knowledge of a particular sociological field, and you also have very specific knowledge within an MPhil dissertation, which is obviously like a very useful project. If you're going on to PhD, you might want to expand that same research project, or if you're going into the professional world, it demonstrates that you have research skills, perhaps for think tanks or for writing reports or NGOs, things like that. You're demonstrating very tangibly that you've kind of built the skills necessary to write at this level, to conduct research at this level. Okay, so I mentioned before that there are 4 different pathways in sociology. You've probably come across them already, but they are in political and economic sociology, the sociology of marginality and exclusion, the sociology of media and culture, and the sociology of reproduction. So each of these different pathways has kind of particular specialists in sociology at the department who will teach and supervise on that pathway, who will teach the core lectures and run seminars on that content, who will very likely be published in that kind of field, and you kind of become a part of the academic discussions and the conversations really at the forefront of the discipline in that particular area, both in the taught elements of the programme, in the lectures, but also in the different research and reading groups that we have at the department and the events that we put on, including the sociology seminar series and other events. So primarily each of the pathways, the offering from the pathways, are these core lectures, 8 core lectures in the first term, which kind of cover a broad range of topics within that particular area. So let me show you some of the different topics. I've got to say, before we go any further, these change each year, the particular topics, because they reflect the expertise of the current members of staff at the department. So don't be looking at this table and thinking this is precisely what I can expect if I apply to sociology and am accepted onto the programme. It changes from year to year based on what our staff are researching and publishing in. But it gives you a kind of a general flavour for the different pathways and a kind of idea for the kinds of topics that might come up. And I should also say that you will pick one of these lecture topics to write your field review essay on. So that's the kind of the most important thing I think about choosing a pathway. You want to be thinking, what is it that I really want to focus on, building a kind of a knowledge base around sociology in this area. I took the political and economic sociology track myself, but I popped into some of the lectures on marginality and exclusion, and that's absolutely allowed. As a student at the University of Cambridge, you're able to access lectures on other MPhil pathways, but also on the undergraduate programme and in other departments, which is, I think, a fantastic resource, actually, in terms of being able to access whatever you find is useful or interesting to your research, or you just have a personal interest in. So on this slide you can see some of the undergraduate, the third year undergraduate papers that you might choose to sit on as an MPhil student. I personally didn't complete my bachelor's degree, my undergraduate in sociology, so I attended a couple of undergraduate papers just because I felt I needed to kind of build up my sociological knowledge, get more of a stable foundation with different kinds of theories and theorists. You'll notice if you come to the department, quite a lot of our MPhil students didn't necessarily do an undergraduate in sociology. They'll have done another social science or a humanities subject, but sociology now kind of captures their approach or interest. So I myself came from politics undergraduate, but really appreciated the kind of the extra dimensions that sociology brings at this level. So I've talked about the kind of the core lectures and the teaching that you can access. Hopefully I made it clear that you can pretty much go to any teaching that you want to go to. It doesn't even have to be sociology. It could be another discipline if you feel that the history department or whatever brings a kind of an interesting and useful angle to your research. You could have a conversation with your supervisor and put that in your study plan. You won't be expected to complete any assessments on lectures that you kind of sit in on from other departments, but it could be useful for you kind of, as long as you don't bite off too much, because again, you've only got 9 months, so you don't want to try to do too much. But I think that's a fantastic resource, really exciting resource. I always thought I was going to go and sit in on all of these philosophy lectures on the side just as a hobby, but, you know, the time got away from me. Okay, so that's the kind of the taught elements of the course. So you move away from those kinds of content-based taught elements in your first term. In your second term, you start thinking more about research methods and data collection. So some of that training is provided from the department itself, in-house training. So we run research skills workshops in Lent term, that's the second term, which include interviewing methods, doing historical research, ethnography, and others. I sat in on a session on using coding programs to code qualitative interviews so that you can get to grips with your data using Starter or Atlas TI. And in addition to the Department of Sociology's methods workshops, you also have research methods modules offered by the Social Sciences Research Methods Programme. That's the SSRMP. You can check out their website. They've got over 120 different courses that you can access, so you can really kind of build your methods profile if you want to. I would particularly recommend it for people that are thinking about going on to do a PhD, especially if you want to apply for funding for your PhD, because it's one of the main things that funders look at. One of the key things that funders look at is your research methods profile. Do you have the skills necessary to conduct research, rigorous research, verifiable research at the highest level? And whether or not you do want to go on to PhD, having these tools under your belt will be invaluable, like I said, in professional contexts, particularly if there's any kind of data collection or research or report writing. You will be able to demonstrate that you've already developed these skills at the University of Cambridge, and you have an example of putting them into practice in your MPhil dissertation. So I didn't mention supervisors yet, but this is actually one of the core parts of the programme. So each student is paired with an academic supervisor. You actually name your chosen supervisor in your application. I'll talk more about the application later, but they're basically with you throughout your time at Cambridge, your entire academic journey. And their job is to kind of act as an advisor and a guide throughout the course. So you'll meet them right at the very start. You'll meet with them at the very start of the programme to talk about your research interests and your kind of academic background, your research proposal, the direction that you want to go in. They will be able to advise you on perhaps, a particular approach or readings maybe, or cases to compare, things like this, to really get you thinking. And they are, of course, an expert in the field. They'll be published in the field and they'll lecture at the university in that area as well. So they're just a fantastic resource that you get on a one-to-one basis to meet with them. So that's kind of like something I think that's really incredibly valuable, particularly when you move into the research elements of the course, to get that guidance so that you're not completely on your own trying to work out what, if you have questions about your data collection or your sample or things like this, you have an expert that you can turn to for kind of tips. And of course, supervisors provide feedback on all of your written work. So on your research essays where you're first setting out, and then of course on your dissertation drafts, they'll give you feedback on that as well. So that's the kind of the supervisor relationship. So a little bit more detail now about the assessment components. So at the start of the programme, in the first term, you have these research essays. So these are not graded, so they don't count towards your final mark. They're an opportunity for you to kind of get to grips with the concepts and the theories and the debates that you are coming into contact with in the taught elements of the programme. So you can typically choose what you write your research essays on. You can determine a question with your supervisor, and it's all kind of just part of you getting to grips with the programme and kind of building your own, finding your own footing and building your own approach. So after you've kind of had these kind of preparatory research essays, you then move on to the first graded component, which is the field review essay. So the way that the field review essay works is you pick 3 of the core lectures from your pathway that you received in the previous term, and you prepare them for the field review essay. And then on the week of the field review, you will receive a question on one of those 3 chosen at random, one of those 3 lecture topics, and then you have a week to write an essay on that topic. So you'll already have received supervisions on these topics, you'll already have draft essays probably prepared, and you've got a week to kind of bring all of that together to answer the question in the best way that you can, and to demonstrate the breadth of knowledge that you've collected over the first term of the course. And that counts for 40% of your final grade. And then, of course, in the final term, the dissertation brings everything together, all of your sociological knowledge, background, your research methods, your data collection analysis, and that counts towards 60% of your final grade. So, like I said, it's an intensive 9-month program, but the good news is that you're not trying to work it out all on your own. So there's plenty of support and services for you to fall back on if you need to on the way. So as well as the rest of the MPhil cohort, roughly 40 other students, you've got all of these different kinds of elements of support that you can rely on. So tutors in your college, the Cambridge has a counselling service. If things get difficult, there's an advice service, Students' Union Advice Service, which helps with any kind of policy or procedural things on the university regulations if you need help with that. There's the Disability Resource Centre, which can help people with accessibility requirements, particularly with moving online, to make sure that you can access all of the teaching provision that you need. And the University Childcare Office if you have children, and the Career Service, which I should say, once you become a member of the University of Cambridge, you have access to the Career Service for the rest of your life. And you can imagine that it's a very well-connected service, and accessing not just their job listings, but also their trainings, interview preparation, building portfolio tips for all these kinds of things is a really incredible resource. So that was a bit whistle-stop. That's the kind of the majority of information that I wanted to share about the programme. I'm next going to skip onto the website to give you some application tips. Okay, so in terms of making an application to Cambridge, the most important thing to do is, well, I would say this because it's my job, but head over to our website, sociology.cam.ac.uk, and track to the Postgraduate Study section under the Postgraduate Students tab. So here we've got plenty of application information, fees and funding, and postgraduate FAQs. There's also, if you've not had a chance, you can watch a video from the Polity Prize winner from last year who talks a little bit about his experience on the programme, Emilio Fehu. Okay, so applications. Again, we've got an overview video that you can check out in your own time, but just to kind of give you a quick overview, to make the actual application itself, you'll be doing that through the Postgraduate Admissions website. So you don't apply to the Department of Sociology, you apply to the University of Cambridge through their Postgraduate Admissions website. But we've got plenty of information here to help you through that process before you make the application. The most important thing that I need to make you aware of are the deadlines. I would absolutely recommend applying, if you can, by the first round deadline. That's the 3rd of December 2020. It's important for 2 reasons. Firstly, you will be eligible for the graduate funding competition, so you might be able to access funding from the University of Cambridge. Secondly, the way that our admissions process works in 3 different rounds means that the course tends to fill up from round to round. Supervisor availability decreases because we will already have given places in late January, early February, which will take away from your chance to get in the 2nd round or the 3rd round. Not to say you can't do it, absolutely not, but it tends to be that over the first 2 rounds, the majority of places are handed out. By the 3rd round, which is handed out on a case-by-case basis, there's only really a handful of places left. So in some ways, it's better to wait and apply in the 1st round than to apply in the 3rd round. Or if you have the financial means, you can always, of course, apply twice. So entry requirements, we're looking for a high T1 at undergraduate level. The higher, the more competitive you're going to be. There's international equivalents here as well if you didn't complete your undergraduate degree in England or in the United Kingdom. You'll be asked, amongst other things, for a research proposal, and there's some tips for some of the things that we look out for here. Again, it doesn't have to be complete, ready to go, this is absolutely what I will research and I can start tomorrow, but the supervisors and the postgraduate admissions, they want to see that you have really thought very thoroughly through the kinds of the questions that you're going to need to ask in order to put your MPhil dissertation together. So it says here a clear, viable and well-motivated research question. So you really want to be able to kind of pitch a question which is a gap in the literature that you have ideas about how to start answering through your data collection. You've thought about the research ethics that are involved, and the kind of the methods that you'd use to collect the data as well. So we do look for you to nominate a supervisor in your application. So you can do that by browsing over to our academic staff pages here and looking for a supervisor that matches your kinds of research interests. So do keep an eye on some of our staff are on research leave, for example, so they won't be able to accept new MPhil students. But have a look for someone that kind of matches with the things that you're interested in. Finally, just to say briefly about interviews, typically we don't interview MPhil students, but if you have applied for postgraduate funding from the university and you're considered competitive, you may well then attend an interview because the funding process is even more competitive, as you can imagine, than the actual application process. So interviews are often used for the different funding bodies for awarding funding, which leads me nicely onto fees and funding. So the kinds of the cost of the program and the cost of maintenance and living in Cambridge is broken down on the postgraduate admissions website here. You can kind of check the costs of the degree there. Students from the UK and EU students with settled status will be able to take out the government's postgraduate loan. That's quite common. That's also what I did as a way to afford the tuition payments, and then whatever your sources of funding are for meeting the kind of the maintenance costs. So to say briefly about the kinds of the graduate funding competition, so if you applied before this deadline, that's the 3rd of December, you can be entered into the postgraduate funding competition, which combines all of these different sources of funding, and you can go through and check which ones you think you would be eligible for. Gates is for everyone apart from UK students, and these other ones are for UK students. Some of them are regardless of nationality, Cambridge and Harding. So have a look through them. If you are thinking of applying to funding, it's good to make that explicit in your application as well. And some funds, for example, particularly the ESRC, is looking for you to be conducting research in one of their chosen areas. So you really do need to tailor your application if you're going for their funding options. Accommodation is another expense. Do check the different colleges here to see if they offer postgraduate accommodation or if they expect their students to find their own accommodation in Cambridge. And you can also get an idea of the costs involved as well of college accommodation via their websites. Generally speaking, living in Cambridge doesn't have to be, it's not as expensive as you might think it is. It's very compact, so if you have a bike or if you don't mind walking, everything's quite close by. Living costs and socialising costs can also be very low. I personally did most of my shopping at Aldi and cooked for myself in the shared kitchen in the college accommodation, which kept the costs right down. But of course, in the colleges, you also have the dining halls and all sorts of things if you choose. And like I said, it is an investment. The career opportunities that open up to you after getting a Cambridge degree are significant and worth taking into consideration. Okay, thanks for sticking with me till the end. I hope that you found this presentation useful. If you have questions, please feel free to contact us by email. All the very best with your application. Thanks again for coming today, and see you.